Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it. I love the people of Canada. I disagree with the leadership of Canada. And something's going to happen there. But if they want to play the game, I don't mind. We can play the game all they want. Mexico, we've had very good talks with them. And this is retaliatory. This is retaliatory to a certain extent. Millions of people flowed into our country through Mexico and Canada, and we're not going to allow that. And by the way, we have among the lowest numbers we've ever had of people crossing our border, the lowest numbers since my administration.
Mr. President, you said, so on Free Social, you said that you were going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South Africa?
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
And on the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he held rates. What's your reaction to him not changing the rates?
What did you say?
Fed Chair Jerome Powell, the Fed meeting was this week. He held the rates. He didn't cut them.
No, I'm not surprised. I think holding the rates at this point was the right thing to do.
Mr. President, which country will be next on tariffs? Would you consider taxing the UK, for example?
Well, we're going to see what happens. It'll happen. But we're going to, we'll see how things work out. It might happen with them, but it will definitely happen with the European Union. I can tell you that, because they've really taken advantage of us. And, you know, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. And we take everything from them. Millions of cars, tremendous amounts of food and farm products. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity, what they've done. Well, Prime Minister Starmer has been very nice. We've had a couple of meetings. We've had numerous phone calls. We're getting along very well. We'll see whether or not we can balance out our budget. With the European Union, it's $350 billion deficit. So obviously something's going to take place there. Where?
25%?
With who? With who?
The EU, how much?
I wouldn't say there's a timeline, but it's going to be pretty soon. No, I'm not concerned. We may have short-term some little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada. And why? What's the purpose of that? Why would we have deficits? And you look at if you look at pharmaceuticals and drugs, if you look at various products, it's much cheaper in other countries. We're not going to allow that much longer. We're not going to take it. Well, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision. I've spoken with people from Canada, I've spoken with people from Mexico, and I've spoken to a lot of other people too. I'm speaking with Prime Minister Trudeau tomorrow morning, and I'm also speaking with Mexico tomorrow morning. And I don't expect anything very dramatic. We put tariffs on. They owe us a lot of money, and I'm sure they're going to pay. About what? I don't think troops will be necessary in Panama. What Panama has done is terrible for national security for this part of the world. And, 70% of the signage on the Panama Canal was written in Chinese. That's not right. So it wasn't meant for China. It should have never been made. The deal was a ridiculous deal. We lost 38,000 people building the Panama Canal, one of the great wonders of the world. 38. It was the most expensive project ever built by this country, if you take it forward. The most expensive project ever built. We lost 38,000. And what happens? China owns it all of a sudden? It's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. We have national security concerns, and they wouldn't let it happen either.
Mr. President, what does Canada and Mexico need to do for you to lift the tariffs? What are specifically you want?
They'd have to balance out their trade, number one. They've got to stop people from pouring into our country, and we've stopped it. They haven't stopped it. We've stopped it. They have to stop people from pouring in, and we have to stop fentanyl, and that includes China. Fentanyl has killed this year at least 200,000 people. It's pouring in from China through Mexico and Canada, and they've got to stop it. And if they don't stop it, the tariffs are going to get worse, a lot worse.
Let's talk about the US tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Economic impact analysis. Now, on February 1st, 2025, President Donald Trump announced the imposition of significant tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China, citing concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking, specifically fentanyl. Effective February 4th, a 25% tariff applies to all Canadian and Mexican goods, with a 10% tariff on Canadian energy products and Chinese imports. These tariffs are expected to have several far-reaching impacts on the economy. Number one, we expect to see increased consumer prices. Now, these tariffs are anticipated to raise the cost of imported goods, including electronics, automobiles, and groceries, as importers pass on the additional cost to consumers, which means you and I. Analysts estimate the American household could face an additional $1,000 to $1,200 in annual expenses due to these tariffs. In addition, we have inflationary pressures, which means that economists warned that the tariffs could contribute to a high inflation rates by increasing the prices of imported goods and materials. Now, former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers described the tariffs as, and I quote, self-inflicted wound, likely to result in higher prices due to reduced supply.
This is a stop or I'll shoot myself in the foot kind of threat policy. It defies economic logic. It means higher prices for consumers. It means much more expensive inputs for American producers. Think about the way car manufacturing happens in North America. The car and the process of being produced goes back and forth across the border 5 times, 10 times. Every time there's going to be some kind of tariff. What that's going to do is make the North American companies and the North American jobs less competitive relative to what's happening in Europe or China or Japan. There's no real economic logic to this. Yes, we've got all kinds of issues that we have real justification with respect to Mexico on drug cartels and the like. Whether this is the right thing to do with respect to Mexico, I think there are a lot of questions and doubts that somebody could have. But Canada, why, of all the countries in the world, would we right now be deciding to launch economic war on Canada? Canada, where the minimum wage, basic wages are higher, where there's more union protection for workers than there is here. I just do not get the logic of these policies. And make no mistake, this is a regressive tax on American consumers.
And so you mentioned Canada. I want to stay with that for a second, because you're right to say that Canada and Mexico, the borders with both of those countries are very different. There is a false equivalency that's being kind of held here with what's going on at those two borders. The government did a study on fentanyl coming in from the northern border. It is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage versus what's coming in through the southern border. And it seems to me that Canada itself and its government is confused by what exactly it's supposed to be doing to try to reverse or wave off these tariffs.
You cannot fathom the logic of launching this kind of economic war on traditionally our longest standing ally. The Trump administration was on solid ground when it was very critical of the Biden administration for canceling the Keystone Pipeline, which after all was a way of moving oil from natural gas from Canada to the United States. That was about more imports. That was about strengthening North America, and that was their policy. Why dividing our allies and uniting our enemies could possibly be good strategy, I'm afraid I just cannot understand. And it's not just higher prices. This is going to cost us jobs. It's going to cost us jobs because the inputs that go into what we sell to Americans, the inputs that go to what we sell in Europe, what we sell in Asia, all of that is going to be made more expensive because of these tariffs. And so I just cannot see why this is a strategy that is being pursued. It's a famous thing that economists disagree about just about everything. Just about all economists agree that raising tariffs to the highest level they've been at for the United States on an across-the-board basis since just after the Second World War, that's a mistake, is a proposition that I guess 95% of economists agree with. And it takes a lot to unite the economics profession.
In addition, we expect to see supply chain disruptions because businesses rely on cross-border supply chains, which may experience increased costs and logistical challenges, potentially leading to production delays and further prices increase for consumers. Also, we expect to see some retaliatory measures. In response to these US tariffs, Canada and Mexico have announced plans to introduce retaliatory tariffs on American goods, which means these will harm US exporters and escalate already high tensions. The other impact we expect to see is impact on workers. The tariffs may have mixed effects on American workers. Number one, manufacturing sector will see some increased costs and strained relations, which may outweigh any tariff benefits. This means that many economists and business leaders caution that the potential for increased consumer goods and costs will lead to more inflation and strained international relations, which could outweigh the intended benefits. We also expect to see some changes in the agricultural sector. Farmers could be adversely affected by these tariffs from Canada and Mexico, leading to decreased demands for US agricultural products and potential job losses in farming communities. Also, we have some service sector effects, which means we expect to see increased costs for goods, which may reduce consumer spending on services, potentially leading to reduced hours or layoffs for workers in retail, hospitality, and other service industries. Broader impacts on prices of goods and services, specifically cars. Now, the tariffs are expected to lead to some noticeable differences or increases in various sectors, specifically in the car sector. With Mexico being a significant exporter of auto parts to the US, the 25% tariff could increase production costs for American car manufacturers, leading to higher vehicle prices for consumers. Economists expect to see some impact on prices of goods and services, specifically with the electronics, because, as you know, many electronics are imported from China, which will face a 10% tariff, which potentially makes items like smartphones, laptops, TVs more expensive for American consumers. We mentioned groceries. Now, a significant portion of fresh produce in the US is imported from Mexico. Now, the 25% tariffs could lead to higher prices for fruits and vegetables, impacting many households' grocery bills. Other impacts on prices of goods and services, we've mentioned this, groceries and energy, right? A significant portion of fresh produce in the US comes from Mexico, which means the 25% tariff will be passed on to consumers like you and I. Energy costs. Although Canadian energy produces a lower 10% tariff, regions in the US which rely heavily on Canadian oil and natural gas may experience increased energy costs, affecting heating and transportation expenses as well. Now, because of these tariffs, which are going to effect this morning, we see that the stock market today is not looking good. The Dow Jones, S&P 500 and Nasdaq futures plummet after Trump hits Canada, Mexico and China with tariffs. You see on the right hand side, we have S&P futures down 2%. Dow futures is down 1.56%, almost 700 points. The Nasdaq futures is down 2.61%. 563 points. Also, we have other indexes which are down. Crude oil is up 1.94%, which means expect higher prices at the pump. Price of gold is down as well. But the biggest news of tonight is that the S&P futures, the Dow futures, and these Nasdaq futures are all down anywhere from 1.5% to 2.61%. These are all effects of the Trump tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada. So what's the conclusion and future outlook? There are really four things that economists are looking for. The implementation of the tariffs, while the administration aims to address concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking through these tariffs, the broader economic implications, including increased consumer prices, potential job losses, and strained international relations, have raised concerns among economists. And that's it. A brief look at what's really happening with the tariffs imposed by President Trump. And that's pretty much it. Quick analysis. Subscribe to Data Finance 365. Till next time, stay positive. Peace.